In the 60s, these narrow streets were the scene of a bloody civil war. 20 years after India gained her independence, Britain was trapped in a war over a colony she had already promised to leave. Soldiers were fighting and getting killed for no reason anyone in Britain could understand.
I don't believe that we need necessarily have left Aden in the way we did. In almost every other case, every other colony we left, the bands played Will You Know Come Back Again, and there was a great deal of tear-jerking, and in some instances, a lot of people regretted the fact that we'd gone. But we left Aden rather like thieves in the night.
Queen Victoria was left behind. Today she rests at the back of a museum. In 1839, this colony became the first imperial acquisition of her reign. Aden was a fishing village when Captain Haynes of the Indian Navy landed here and defeated the local sultan. This superb natural harbour was at first thought vital to safeguard the route to India. After the opening of the Suez Canal in 1869, Aden started to prosper. Aden was at the centre of the British colonial trading system. Ships stopped here for fuel en route between Europe and India, the Far East and Australia. It was still a loyal imperial outpost in 1953, when the newly crowned Queen Elizabeth paid a visit on her world tour.
Soon after coming ashore, the Queen took the salute and marched past. The bearing and discipline of every unit parading on this proud occasion was most impressive. The Arab people, many children among them, were obviously eager to catch a glimpse of the Queen as she presently drove off towards the RAF hospital.
The Queen's visit really was quite astonishing. I'd never expected to see such popular jubilation and all the rest of it. There was some dancing in the streets and singing, and there was not a voice raised in opposition at all.
In the 50s, Aden became the busiest harbour in the world after New York. And in 1954, BP opened a huge new refinery to process oil from the Gulf. The British enjoyed the good life in the Little Raj. Pampered by Arab servants and catered for by Indian traders, they felt safe in this imperial backwater. Throughout the 1950s, as the empire was being dismantled, Aden's economy boomed. It was a duty-free mecca for the thousands of tourists off the ocean liners. Lost in time, British rule went on in the old colonial style, as if nothing had happened. Around the colony of Aden itself was a wilderness, the British protectorates, an area as large as England and Wales, occupied by feuding tribes. When Britain grabbed Aden, she had no interest in these lawless territories other than as a defensive zone. Tribal rulers, like the Emir of Baihan, were persuaded to sign treaties of protection and to accept political advisors. The few Britons who entered this medieval world could do little to change it.
I was coming down from up country and I stopped in a village. I heard a clanking noise at my feet. And I looked around and I saw a kind of grill in the ground below. And I could hear somebody moving about and cranking. And I asked who it was, and they were all very evasive, the Sheikh in particular. So I said, get this chap out. And they brought him out, and he had a beard down to his waist, and he's dressed in rags and emaciated to a degree. And I asked how long he'd been there, and nobody could remember. And apparently he'd been locked away years before, and there he'd been left. So I told, and he was shackled, hands and foot, and I told them to knock the shackles off and let the fellow go free. I thought he'd thank me for the good deed, but far from it. He complained that from now on nobody would give him any food.
In the protectorates, around 500,000 people scratched a living from the barren soil. Unlike their neighbors in Saudi Arabia, the tribal rulers had no oil and practically no other source of income. Britain bought them as allies with a few rifles and a little money.
This then is the Aden Protectorate. And one of the main reasons for the cessation of barbarism here is the Aden Protectorate levies, a small but compact force formed in 1928. Few recruits can write, so an inky thumb signs them in for an initial 4 years.
This army of Arab soldiers under British officers brought the British and the Sultans into close alliance. The colonial power also employed a more modern system.
What happened was that if you had a tribe that was causing trouble, you got hold of its sheikhs and you said, well, you either do as you're told and hand in hostages to answer for your good behavior, or we're going to come and bomb you. And you gave them time to clear out of their villages or houses and get their flocks and herds out of the way, and then you went off and dropped bombs, small bombs on the whole. And it was a remarkably efficacious and cheap way of maintaining law and order in otherwise unget-at-able areas.
Until the 1950s, air policing subdued the warring tribesmen. But even this remote corner was about to be transformed by the nationalist revolution sweeping through the Arab world. The tribesmen were radicalized by a new voice from Cairo. Gamal Abdel Nasser became the champion of the Arab world after his triumph over Britain and France in 1956. He transmitted the anti-colonial message even to the South Arabian protectorates.
Nasser turned to be a hero, a legend, for all the Arab people. For the first time they hear an Arab leader really challenging a big power, insisting on the freedom of all the Arab world and on the Arab nationalism.
Wherever you went in the protectorate, you could hear the Cairo radio coming out of these transistor radios. You'd find some old gentleman died in Blue Road plying his field with Nasser's propaganda coming out. And it was almost impossible to counter. It was, after all, calling for freedom from foreigners. I didn't believe that our propaganda, such as it was the slightest bit of use.
Cairo radio denounced the Sultans with their British arms as enemies of the Arab Revolution. The Sultans were so worried by this propaganda that they took up a British plan to form a federation for their defense. In 1959, the Federation of South Arabia was established. Eventually, most of the rulers were to sign up. Britain built a White Hall in the sand and palaces for the Sultans. In the new federal capital, the rulers performed a charade of parliamentary government.